Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Paranormal Round Table. Tonight, we give you back to your host, Wolf and Sal, as they bring you the second part of their interview with paranormal investigator Anna Choate. She investigated Fox Hollow Farms, and she has some really great stuff for us.
So, what other good stuff went on out there?
Sure. Well, I've got another EVP for you guys. Hopefully this will come through okay. And with EVPs, anyone who's used to listening for things like this, sometimes you have to listen to it 10,000 times, and it kind of takes a minute for your brain to pick up that undertone of the human voice that's there.
I call that an art form. It definitely takes practice so you can pick up and have, for lack of better words, have an ear for it, of what's coming up.
Right, yeah. And some of them you listen and you're like, come on, guys, really? Like, you're really stretching here. But then other ones are, you call it a grade A EVP, and it's sort of one of those things where once you hear it, you can't unhear it, and you realize that's definitely a distinct human voice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the setup for this one is that we were in the pool room, and I'm trying to think of the circumstances surrounding it. It was so long ago. Oh, and actually, there's kind of a cool story to this one. This one I literally stumbled on yesterday for the very first time. I was getting files together for the show, and I was looking at this long list of audio links that I had, or audio files, and I was looking for a specific one. And so I was kind of clicking through a couple, and I just happened to click on this one out of like 100. And I'm listening to it, and within the first 7 seconds, I realized that there was a voice on there. So I sent it to my teammates to get their opinion, and they're like, yeah, there's definitely a voice on there, and that's definitely none of us. We all went back and forth and said, could it have been this? Could it have been that? And we came to the consensus that there just really is no explanation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
If your guy wants to pull up what, I hate to like give away what I think is says in advance, but so he knows which one. It's the pull her out, or at least that's what it sounds like.
That's the title, right?
Yeah, it sounded like all around or pull her out or something, and it's a whispery male toned voice. I think maybe if he wants to play the 1 second clip first so that people can kind of know what to listen for,
Mm-hmm.
and then if he wants to play the 11-second one afterward, and that'll give some context.
Sure. Well, hey, let's go ahead and do that. Let's run it.
Can you guys hear that at all?
Yeah, that was the 1 second one. Yeah. You want to run that one again? Go ahead. One more time, please. It's weird. It's creepy. Keep going. Now, are we ready for the 11-second one, Anna?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's run that one too.
Okay, Tony, play it.
Okay.
So to explain, you hear me sigh at the end. It happens. It's right at the end of that shuffling noise, but there's a distinct other layer of sound there that you can tell is like a human sounding voice, and we're all 1,000% sure that it's none of us.
Wow.
I wonder what it's making reference to.
Pull her out.
Well, the other interesting thing is it's the pool room, and at one point, unfortunately, I hadn't marked this clip, so I can't remember exactly like where we were all sitting or what we were doing at the time, but my teammates all took a dip in the pool. I conveniently left my swimsuit at home. I don't really like swimming in dead people's particulate matter, so
Yes.
I decided not to go for a dip, and plus the pool was not heated, so I also had that excuse. But they went swimming, and I mean, if you think about it, this is complete conjecture on my part, obviously, as is a lot of this field of research. But if you think about it, Herb did like men, not women, and there was only one woman in the pool at that time. And what I hear is something very quick, like pull her out. And I can't help but wonder, like, are they saying something about my teammate in the pool, or I really don't know. We'll never know. But that's kind of what I took from it.
That's interesting. And this happened right as they were. Were they engaging in swimming and having all that fun in there, or was shortly after?
Yeah, see, unfortunately, That's what sucks is I'm actually not sure, because usually at the beginning of an audio clip, we do a verbal cue to say this is so and so and so and so in this room, and this is the time and the date. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, that audio clip doesn't have that. It just starts without any indicator. I do know I do know we're in the pool room. I'm just not sure exactly what we were doing.
The only other thing I was thinking of outside of what you just mentioned, and you mentioned that he had mannequins all around the pool and stuff like that. Were they female mannequins or were they male mannequins, or a mixture of both?
They were both. He was non-discriminatory in his mannequin selection. It was pretty damn creepy.
The only, and this is conjecture, just like you said, maybe at one time during one of these events, in one of these victims that he got, that they started playing in the pool, and one of the victims pulled one of those mannequins in there playing with it, and of course it's hard to tell. I mean, that's pure conjecture and speculation, but that could be.
He probably swam in there alone sometimes, and Lord knows what he was doing when he was on his own, or even with other people. So we'll never know. He took those secrets to the grave. But yeah, it really does make you wonder. And one other thing that kind of ties in with the female theme, I mean, I don't even know if that's exactly what it's saying. It does. I listened to it about 10,000 times yesterday, and tried different speakers, because that makes a difference. Which, by the way, if your listeners are having a hard time listening to it, try earbuds, try different speakers. It really does make a big difference sometimes. This was not my team's first trip to Fox Hollow. It was my first trip, but I had taken a hiatus for a little while, and so I did not go on their first trip. However, when they did, our team leader, when he was swimming in the pool that time, they caught a very distinct EVP. Unfortunately, I don't have that file at the moment, that says his wife's name. So that's kind of interesting, because that's another female being referenced in that pool room.
That's very interesting. Wow. So now the other, I believe how many, we got one more left that you sent us. So why don't you give us a little rundown on that one?
Sure. Okay. So this one's kind of interesting. We just want to be disrespectful at all regarding what happened to the victims, of course. But because all the remains have never been found in their entirety, we kind of felt like, we'd kick ourselves if we were there and we didn't at least try to look. And so we literally went and bought shovels and went out into the forested area. And when Mark had guided us through the forest and pointed out where he claimed there were still remains, we made X's with large sticks to mark the area, so we knew where to come back and try to dig. So we came out there and we're digging, and we had a couple interesting things happen. Prior to the EVP that we caught, we were using the Ovilus. I don't know how familiar you guys are with that.
I've heard of the Ovilus. I'm sorry.
It has a database of words.
Yes.
Sorry. It has a database of words that it'll spit out. Sometimes it'll sit there for hours and absolutely nothing comes out. And then sometimes there's like all this jibber jabber, and occasionally it doesn't make sense. But once in a while, it's so specific that it's kind of hard to just shrug it off. So we're literally out there digging in the dirt. It had been completely quiet on this device. And then suddenly it gave us 3 words, which were grave, attitude, and gentle. And I actually sent you guys a photo of that on the screen of the device so that you can see what it said. And to me, I don't know, I mean, grave while we're digging and attitude gentle, we took that as maybe saying, like, have some respect. And so we verbally said, if that's you, we mean absolutely no disrespect. We feel horrible about what happened to you, and we're just trying to help find who is still here so that hopefully their families can get some closure. And immediately after we said that we were doing it with the utmost respect, it said great.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so to me, I was like, okay, that's a little bit hard to dismiss as just random, in my opinion.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. So then as we're digging, and there's a photo of this too, I don't know if you guys will put that up, but as we're digging, we found what looked like it could potentially be a tooth. But as I said, a lot of these remains were burned. They'd been out there, since like the early to mid 90s.
Yes.
So they've been weathered. So it was kind of hard to tell. And we're like, is that a pebble? Is it wood? Is it a tooth? So we started messing around with it. And my teammate took her nail. He was the one holding photo, and starts kind of scratching at it. And you'll hear me on the audio saying that I think that it's like a pebble or a stone at first. And keep in mind too that Richard, our team leader, he's a paramedic, so it's not like he's not familiar with anatomy. And you'll hear him on the audio saying, "I don't know, I potentially be a tooth." So she starts scraping at it, and there's this weird stuff that it's like flaky and it rolls off. So we realized that's not a stone. And basically, right at that moment is when we caught the last EVP that I'll play for you guys. That we think that it's saying something along the lines of "wait that," or "that right there," something similar to that. It seems to be 3 words, and immediately before the 3 words, you hear kind of almost this squeak, like somebody's trying to get air out of their lungs, like they're trying to force themselves to say something, and then the words flow out in quick succession right afterwards. And on that one, it's kind of hard to pick up at first. So on that one, I'd recommend starting with the shortest clip and then maybe going to the longer one.
All right. Well, let's see if we can get that thing rolling on here. You ready?
That is weird. And that's me, obviously, at the end saying that is weird. I know it's super fast. You have to really listen for it. And it sounds like somebody strained air. And unfortunately, you kind of need speakers. But I swear it's in there. And it definitely sounded human to all of us. And it's absolutely 100% none of us.
Okay.
So if you want to play one of the longer clips, like maybe the 14-second one, you'll hear us talking about this thing, trying to decide if it's a tooth or not.
Sure.
And then the words are like really hidden in there super quick.
Oh yeah, let's run that one. You ready?
Oh, that's really flaky. Yeah, maybe that's not a stone. That's really weird. That is weird.
Yeah, you can hear somebody. You can hear somebody trying to it's like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Wow.
Well, it's kind of like a strange squeak, and then a "wait right there," like really, really fast in a whispered tone. Unfortunately, I don't know if it'll sound the same to the listeners or on your end, but that audio doesn't sound quite as clear as it does in the file that I have. But I don't know, maybe you guys can tweak it or something to kind of bring out that tone. That actually, even though the audio isn't as good on that one, that was actually one of our more distinct EVPs that we got. And it was interesting, since we're talking about a tooth and discussing, is it a tooth, isn't it? If it does say something like "that right there" or "wait right there," I don't know. It was just interesting timing to get a voice.
It sounded like they're like when you were saying the lungs heaving the air. It did sound like that.
Yeah, it's creepy all the way around. I've heard one other EVP that is close to that is as clear as the first one, the first clip we played, and this came from a friend of mine, and he swore up and down. I have no reason to doubt him. He caught it at his house in the Houston area, and it was something to the effect that his kids were in the bedroom, and they were just recording with the phone, like an iPhone, and they were in there by themselves, and they said, "Is anyone here?" And then shortly after that, almost not even half a second after that, you hear a "yeah," and the kids swore up and down. They told my buddy Joe. His dad said, "No, it wasn't us, Dad. We didn't do this. We're not trying to play a joke." So
right.
It was amazing when I heard it, and it was clear. And I was I was tripped out. That's for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. And it's funny you mentioned that. We didn't get this EVP. This was something that Joe LeBlanc, the tenant who lived on the upper floor of the carriage house. Yeah. I'm sure you can find it online. I know it's in one of the documentaries.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah,
he says the married one, right?
Yeah. He just used his phone and made sure everything was really quiet, turned off the fan, and he was asking, "Is there anybody here?" And a voice pretty distinctly says the married one. I thought to myself, well, that could be that one of the victims was married, or it could be that they're trying to say that Herb did it. He's the married one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's tough.
Yeah, I took away from it that they were all gay men, so most of them weren't married, and Baumeister probably was saying that it was him, the married one.
That's
very possible.
That could very well be it. Wow.
I know that there was something we had talked about before, that there was somebody that I had was talking to you about, and they had worked in the house that was the boyhood home of Ted Bundy. They didn't know that it was his boyhood home, and
they found that out after the fact, right?
Yeah, and that there was something that pulled his shirt and then got pulled off a ladder, and then afterwards they find out that it was Bundy's boyhood home. So yeah, it is very common, I guess, that these psychos or whatever
leave all that residual
the
energy.
Lizzie Borden house comes to mind.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing about the Lizzie Borden case is that they didn't get as much hard evidence as they claim. I don't know. That's what I've heard. But at the same time, it's hard to tell because it's been so long. And it was a very prolific case, just due to the savagery that was involved with those killings. But I don't know. It just, to me, it was, that one is just on its face was really savage. So I don't even,
well, they say that maybe her father was, sexually abusing her.
Yes.
Is kind of theory that they postulate. And if there was ever a reason to snap in such a savage way, I think that would probably classify.
I would be interested into finding out if they could ever go and visit the area. I don't even know if the thing is still there, but the castle that Elizabeth Bathory was in, being, of course, amazing. The most prolific serial killer of all time, was a female. She killed over 650 women.
Oh yeah, to bathe in their blood.
Yeah, she didn't just bathe in their blood. I mean, that's that. There was a book I read years ago when I was like a teenager or something. I was one of my stints in places of keeping me in line or whatever. And yeah, I was a wayward youth. So I did a lot of reading, and it was a book called The Truth About Dracula or something like that. And part of it was about him, but then the other part was about Elizabeth Bathory. Mm-hmm. And I had never heard of her before, and I just thought it was a book about Dracula. And so I read it, but then it had her in there, and it talked about all the killings that she had done. And it was crazy, dude. Like, I mean, she didn't just bathe in their blood. That was like just something that they did. They kind of latch on to that. Like, Jeffrey Dahmer ate somebody's biceps. So they're like, he was a cannibal. Well, that's like saying that she only killed these girls to bathe in their blood. No,
right,
there was a lot of homosexual stuff going on with that too. She was killing these women, and there was all kinds of like sex games or whatever was going on between her and her aunt, and they were murdering their victims all these different kinds of ways, doing these horrible things to them, and it was just like there was this one thing they would stick a man. It was like an Iron Maiden, and they would stand below them as the blood dripped down.
Oh wow, they had a lot of sick fetishes.
It was horrible, dude. And then her husband was a psycho too. He was some baron or something.
Well,
count or whatever. And
or a duke or something.
Whatever
like
he was. She was a countess, and she married some other noble turd.
Well, he's a count. So.
Yeah, or some crap. But he was something else before, and I don't know the whole story. Right. But then he taught her some other sadistic ways to torture people, and I mean, it was like just they were inbred sick people,
Well, throughout history.
From Hungary.
Right. So, well, when you look at history and you start really digging in history, you'll find that lots of these nobles, the aristocrats, a lot of them had some really sick and twisted fetishes / practices. And of course, in those days, you figure when the aristocrats were, in power or had a whole lot of more power than they do today, they had a lot more overt power that stuff could be covered up, quite easily by them. Some of the stuff they did, not to mention, apart from killing commoners, servants, etc., it's there's other stuff such as pedophilia and junk like that. It's talked about. So there were some sick people up there. But
the place is called it's spelled Kachtis, but it says it's pronounced Kachtiki. And it's a castle. It's now in modern day Slovakia. But she was a Hungarian noble.
Yes.
If you ever want to read about this woman, and then it says that she is alleged to have been the world's most prolific female serial killer. Well, actually, there is nobody that we know of that single-handedly was responsible for the murder of 653 people by themselves.
True.
So yeah.
The only one that comes to mind right now for me that would even come close, and that's not that close, is Henry Lee Lucas had 200 plus.
Well, he claimed.
Alleged.
He was trying to use it to get out of his cell so he could go drink Dr. Pepper and eat barbecue. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think he was just full of crap,
He said, I'm going to die anyway, so I'll take the blame for them all.
Yeah, and he could get out and go run around and have fun.
It'll prolong his stint on death row. So.
Yeah, because I remember.
What about the... Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, speaking of the most prolific killers, I can't remember his name. He was some count or, again, some sort of nobility. I think he had fought with Joan of Arc, and he was one of the biggest, sickest serial killers ever. And he exclusively tortured and did horrible things and murdered the local children in the area. And I think he was finally tried and executed for his crimes, but he got his servants to dispose of the bodies. Do you know what I'm talking about? I can't think of his name.
No, I do not.
That is interesting. I've heard mention of something like that, but I've never gotten a name. But at the same time, those types of practices during those times, those eras were commonplace. So
yeah, well, and when you were noble, you got away with it.
Yeah, because you had the overt power to get away with stuff.
You could do what you wanted, but I mean, I don't think it was commonplace in the way that. It was just. I think it was common for them. They could kill and rape, but I don't think that they were all psychos.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
And of course, there's been lots of people who've committed mass murder. I'm just talking about as far as the sheer numbers that are accredited to one person. I think Bathory was the most prolific.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who came close to 653 people.
I'd have to do some extensive research on that to see if we can find anybody come close to that.
I haven't really studied serial killers a whole bunch, but. It's not like a passion or anything like that of mine to study.
But it is an interesting topic.
It's interesting, but then it's also, they're just so
blood and gore.
They're so sick that it's hard to digest it for any. You can't digest it all. And I had these books. I had all these different Time Life series of books. I had one of Ancient Civilizations, and I have a bunch of different ones of Civil War, and I think a set of serial killer ones, and I gave them to my nephew's ex-girlfriend because I couldn't read them for any length because it's just I don't know, man. The subject is so warped. I still you're talking about those women that were at the Bundy trial. What in the freaking heck are you doing? I mean,
it makes you
glorifying
wonder.
These people that do these horrible freaking things, and they're evil. I mean, and they're evil. And obviously, according to the investigations you've done, I mean, their evil lives on. They created more evil that just keeps perpetuating. And it's just, I don't know. It's just horrible. I know that when I was reading about some of Dahmer's stuff or whatever, and I just got to the point where I was like, oh, man, I just couldn't read anymore. It was just so crazy. I kind of felt that way when I was reading about the Aztecs. I was reading a book about the Aztecs, and it was going extensively into all their practices. And it was, at some point, I was just like, man, this is just so disgusting. They were such a disgusting people. I just they were like a whole race of serial killers. And for people to glorify them and put them up on a pedestal is just beyond me, how you can identify with that and even lament the destruction of their civilization when everything they did was based upon human sacrifice on a grand scale. I believe that it started under their Emperor of Guatemoc. I think he was one of the worst or first. And it was they kind of traced it back to his, I think it was his reign or whatever, where it really got bad because he had some sort of priest. And that's when they began to worship death itself. And now you see how it perpetuates itself. You see a lot of these people that are into the Santa Muerte, and they worship it. And they I saw a guy that had a tattoo, and I was talking to him about his tattoo, and he told me, he says, that means the saint of death. I'm like, yeah, I know what it means. What does it mean to you? And he goes, well, God made me, Jesus saved me, but she protects me. And I'm like, okay, whatever, dude. So whatever you're into, pal, it's whatever, bro. If you want to go straight to hell when you die, I guess go ahead. I mean, that's your choice. I mean, why waste your time with somebody like that? But I mean, I just know that is a very common thing, and they seem to have this whole, there's this whole worship of death and murders and murderers in our society. They'll talk horribly about these mass killers of these leaders that they claim killed all these people, or have people do it, but then by the same token, these people admire these murderers that kill these people. I just don't get it. I don't understand the whole,
The Bible even kind of talks about that with those who choose death and love death, as opposed to those who choose and love life. And I think, in my opinion, like attracts like, and certain vibrations that are kind of on the same frequency definitely attract each other. So when you see these people that are just absolutely, and I don't mean like just a passing curiosity and you kind of want to research it because it's morbidly fascinating. I mean the people that are really into it, and Jeffrey Dahmer's like their hero. You're right. I mean, it's just evil. That's completely evil energy. There's really no other way to get around it. But, I've done a lot of research into near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I know everybody has different belief systems, but I definitely believe in God. And from what I've researched, almost every single experience I've heard somebody talk about where they came back to life, they said that you have to go through every experience, good or bad, that you've ever caused somebody else. And even really infinitesimal stuff, you have to see it from that person's perspective. So these sick people, even if they get away with it in this life, I really personally don't believe that they get it forever.
It's mind-boggling to think what drives these people to just start killing other people they don't even know.
Well, you, Sal, as well, that in being in combat, that you do what you have to do in those situations, but it's not like you're there because you want to do it,
Yeah, it's
now you will run across people like that, you'll run across people that are doing it for the money, and you'll run across people that are doing it, like mercs.
Yeah.
And then you'll run across people that are doing it just because they enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you'll get a few of those the sociopaths. I mean, I think some of the special forces guys that I've dealt with over the years and encountered, there have been probably, just a handful of them that they're pretty much no bones about it. It's just killing is their business, and business is good.
Mm-hmm.
They go from there and into the merc work, and they just do what they do,
because it pays the bills.
Mm-hmm. Well, the body count gives them a paycheck, and they get paid a lot more than you do for doing it. And the upside for you guys was that you got a small paycheck, but you had benefits. Now look at your benefits. They're not even really there. You don't really get anything. I mean, you got nothing. So you got a small retirement. That's about it. I mean, they just totally, but that's
upended
why
that system a long time ago.
Yeah. That's why these guys go into the merc work, but some of them do it just because, you could go into other lines of work, but they do it because they enjoy it.
They enjoy what they do.
Yeah, and I mean, I've ran across a few in my day that were just, absolute killers. They just enjoyed what they did. Peter Neers is one that comes to mind. I don't know exactly what country. I think it was Bavaria or something. He killed 500 and some odd people, but he didn't even come close to the Bathory's number.
No, Bathory.
Pretty much
number.
Tops
the number
list.
Was thrown out there, and this is according to Wikipedia. I don't. I'd rather go to a different source.
What does Wikipedia say?
650. That was at the trial.
653, I thought there was.
Right. They threw out the number, but it could never be totally and completely substantiated.
And they didn't even execute her.
No. She basically
walled up in a room.
Castle lockdown. That's what she got.
Well, they walled her up in a room.
Yeah. So
and then she was confined to the room for the rest of her life. So kind of a sort of imprisonment, and that was it. I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By the way, I found that guy's name. I'm not sure what his body count was, but if anyone feels like getting really creeped out and depressed, the name is Baron de Rais. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's Rais.
Oh, Baron de Rais or Rais. Yeah. Okay. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really creepy story. It was during the 1400s, so that's and he fought with Joan of Arc, which makes it even weirder.
Yeah, he was.
So he was one of the cohorts of Joan of Arc.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I wouldn't say cohort. He fought against her, right? Or with her?
No, he fought with her.
He fought with her.
Oh, okay. I knew she was a piece of crap. No, I'm just kidding. That's not. I'm just joking. So he was. I don't know much about her. I mean, I know a lot about history, and I've read a lot about history. All I know is the basic overview of her story. For some reason, it just never was that interesting to me. I don't know. I know that there's a lot of history that I've read about in Asian, European, But for some reason, her story just never did. I don't know.
Never struck a chord with you?
No, I didn't. For some reason, the Middle Ages. Now, I had a lady tell me one time, and this might be a little bit off topic, but it's our show. Who cares? I'm going to say it. This woman one time, she believed in past lives, and some of what she was saying kind of struck a chord with me because I remember having actually had these sort of weird dreams that I was having, and it was like I was seeing these past lives. I've talked about that before. And I haven't really gone into depth with it on any of these programs, but I will maybe at some point. And it was kind of interesting because she was laying it out there for me, and she was a friend of mine's sister. And I only want to call her my friend because she was, into stuff that I was not into at all.
Yeah, you weren't entertaining.
No, and she was into tarot and all that kind of stuff and divination, and I was just like, I'm not into that, keep it away from me. But she was telling me about my past lives, and then she told me that I, as a soul, was not here during the Middle Ages. And I'm like, well, where was I? And she's like, well, you were off planet. And then she began to talk about how I was a 7 life path, which at that time I had no clue what that was. And so later on, Scorpion got into listening to Glennis McCants and numerology. And that's really cool. It's kind of like your life path number, and it just kind of, because I think everything is numbers. I think everything breaks down to numbers. Maybe it's because my dad's an engineer and my mom's an accountant, so I got this whole number thing. Yeah. But like it was like numbers. Everything is numbers, and I think that numbers tell us what we are and who we are. I think we're all just numbers, really. And so I'm a 7 life path. Years later, I found out. And I thought, oh, that woman. Well, this girl, she said that about me. And I don't know why she took so much time to research me, but she did. I probably just to creep me out. She was a little creepy kid. Not a kid, but she was like, 19-year-old creepy kid, whatever. And she told me, well, she was weird, she was into not goth, but like she would dress weird, and she would walk by me and be like, someone close to you is going to die. And I would just be like, okay. And then, then seriously, my aunt died. So I thought it was kind of odd. I was just like, your little sister's weird, dude. Like, what is up with that kid? Like, why is she so weird? And she was into all this like weird stuff, and then she told me
all the esoteric stuff.
Yeah, and she read some tarot cards at the table while I was hanging out over there playing video games or whatever, and she was reading tarot cards, and she told me I was going to have some legal trouble, which I did, but it wasn't anything that it was, I got accused of something and it blew over easily because I could prove my whereabouts. And for an ex-girlfriend of mine accused me of doing something to her car, which wasn't me. She had several people who did not like her. So it wasn't, and the cop questioned me, and I was like, here's my ticket to the baseball game that I was at, and I was with my dad. So don't try to blame me, So that was pretty easy. And I was like, so I told her later on, I was like, is that your legal trouble? And then she goes, I don't know. It was legal trouble. Nothing else ever happened. So I don't know what the heck she's talking about. But I mean, I guess you could say that was it because I guess I got talked to by the cops. I don't know. Yeah. But she was like one of those people that was really gave me a creepy vibe. And I always thought that that she was, cavorting with spirits or something evil. And I always felt really creeped out in that house. And my friend would describe seeing these shadows that he would see moving around not his sister, actually, it was his stepsister's room.
Right.
And so I always thought maybe there was something to that, but
could have been playing with a Ouija board
or something. I don't know, but I know that she was telling me about this, that I was not here during the Middle Ages. And I always thought about that because I have a really, really, really deep fascination with the ancient world, but not with the Dark Ages. Like the Middle Ages don't really interest me, and it's not really something I'm into, and I don't feel any real affinity towards it.
Right.
But I asked her, so I said, okay, so when did I return? She said, well, you were off of this planet. And then you came back. And I was like, when did I come back? And she told me that I came back in the 1800s. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense because I really don't have a whole lot of fascination with anything from the Middle Ages. It's like after the late Roman period, then my whole history thing, I read it and I studied it, but it wasn't real interesting. Yeah. It was just kind of there. Like I read about Trafalgar and all these other things, the Crimean War, but it wasn't like really, it didn't strike a lot of nerves with me.
Right. Yeah, because I like reading about all the whole deal with the Roman Empire, and then of course up to all the way to the fall and shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and then like my friend, my roommate, he was into the Templars, and he was telling me all about it, and he was always talking about them and the Rosicrucians. And I know a lot about that subject. But
Yeah,
it's just
I think it's a cool subject to learn about, like you. It's just, I don't find that just
fascinating.
eye-catching.
I don't either. He's always into, and I had another friend of mine named Keith who's always, and he's into medieval weaponry, and I collect swords too, but he's like really over the top into the Middle Ages and all that, the Renaissance Festival,
Correct,
and that does not interest me at all. So I just kind of wondered if that guy's sister was correct. Maybe I wasn't here and I just not into it. Maybe I didn't live during that time. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If you believe in the whole concept of reincarnation.
If you subscribe to it, yeah.
World War I, World War II were very interesting to me. The late 1800s and then the Western time was very interesting to me. Don't really get much into, beyond that. Like, I'm just like, once I go to that point,
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I think that's just weird. I always wondered that,
Well, that is definitely a topic for another show sometime. We talk about the numbers and stuff. But, with that being said, Anna, do you have anything else related to the house and y'all's investigation?
The only other thing I have, it's not paranormal at all. It's just, I don't know, I find it humorous. And my teammates got a kick out of it. So just a brief story if you want me to go into it about our last night there.
Yeah, throw it out there.
Okay, so where this was located, again, the forest is really dense, really thick, really humid. And we decided on our last night that we would go, we always do like a last night team photo, a survivor's photo, we call it.
Correct.
And so we thought it'd be neat to go out and hike down into the forest and do it out there. And so it's pitch black, and we did get the photo, but it was complete darkness until the flash went off. So up until then, we couldn't see anything. But my teammate, she walked out in advance, and she was shining a flashlight around. And my whole team knows that I am absolutely a total and complete arachnophobe. Like, I cannot stand spiders.
You're talking to one here.
Yeah, you
And I'm probably in the wrong line of research for that, because you always find yourself in like creepy attics and basements.
That is one of the reasons I told Sal that I can't do it.
Yeah, he's.
Yeah, it's.
You got a kindred spirit
creepy
over here.
Not into the
that's just how much I love researching the paranormal. I'm willing to face my greatest fear.
That's awesome.
But anyway, so they were merciful. They didn't tell me this at the time, thank goodness, because I would have been another victim of Fox Hollow, because I would have just keeled over dead right there. But basically, she walked out in advance with the flashlight, and she's shining it around the forest, and she's like, "What the hell is this like weird glitter everywhere?" It looked like green glitter just all over the place. And then she suddenly realized that the glitter was moving, like all over the forest floor. And then she realized, oh, no, those are spider eyes. And she said the entire floor of this forest was alive. Like, they were just scuttering everywhere. And they knew that I wouldn't go out there if they told me. So she told Richard, and they kept their mouth shut. And I was already paranoid because, I'm not stupid. Of course, I knew there was a lot of bugs out there. So I was like trying to keep branches from touching me and stuff. But we got out there, long story short, and got the photo. And thankfully, I didn't die of a spider bite or anything. But oh man, had I known, I would have been so horrified. And it wasn't until a completely different trip. We were coming back from Gettysburg. And pardon me. And my friends and I are sitting at an airport restaurant eating. And he's like, "Hey, by the way, did you know this?" It's like, hell no, I didn't know that. And so, yeah, the survivor's photo is definitely a survivor's photo for me, because there's no chance in hell I would have gone out there had they told me.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I hate spiders with a passion. I just really...
Oh, yeah, me too.
I can't stand them. I just can't stand them. I mean, I've just... My wife used to collect black widows, and her ex actually had a bunch of them, and
a collection.
Yeah, and I was like, I asked him how do you, when we went out there to California, I mentioned that how did you stand, all those spiders around you, and he was just kind of shrugged his shoulders. I'm like, well, yeah, whatever, dude. I told her, I was like, there's gonna be no spiders around me. If I can help it, I'll kill every single one of them.
Yeah, it's funny that such a little thing can be so frightening, but in my opinion, just nothing should have that many legs. That's just unholy.
Gross. I mean, it's nasty. I don't even like crabs. because they got the same 8 things going on, and
that whole.
Well, I studied it too, that the crustaceans are the ones that gave rise to the arachnids. There were water scorpions.
Yeah.
That came out of the water onto the land, and then they eventually evolved some offshoot into spiders.
Right.
And it's just like, they're just nasty. They're gross. I just don't like these 8-legged scorpion. My roommate scorpion used to have a king scorpion named Samson.
Oh.
He was an emperor scorpion. He was really big, and he was kind of cool.
Well, those black ones, those big black ones? Yeah.
And he was pretty cool. Like, you could put like spiders and stuff in his container, and he would kill and eat them.
Awesome.
And so I told Scorpion, that's fine. If you find a nasty spider, just throw it in there with him.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
He would play with it too. He'd pull it out and it'd crawl all over him, and it never stung him or anything. But I didn't want it on me, and I said, that thing better not get loose because I'll kill it. I mean, that's the end of him,
Hey, being an arachnophobe I think it's quite common, more common than what people think. A lot of people have that.
It's because of I think it's our genetic history, like our ancestral memory.
Right.
We've been poisoned and killed by these things. And,
well, I'm not an arachnophobe. I don't want spiders all over me, but they don't freak me out.
Whatever, dude. You're a weirdo. You're a weirdo.
It definitely freak me out.
Everyone
who knows me have an extremely distinct spider scream.
Oh,
where if
okay.
they hear it, they're like, "Oh, it's a spider. She's not being murdered. It's just a spider."
Okay. Yeah, I had my youngest son when he was little. I had to break him of the fear of roaches. He was afraid of cockroaches.
Oh, that'd be a worse fear, just because they're everywhere. There's so many of them, and if you're in a place where they are, then they're just they're everywhere.
Yeah,
I don't know how you wouldn't be able to survive.
All you do is just step on them. I mean, that's my cure all to it, and I had to basically lock myself and him in a bathroom, small bathroom, with a dead cockroach to take that first step. Once I got him in there, it's just me and him, and this is a short version of the story.
It? Yeah.
No. I made him look at it. I said, "Look, it's dead," and I explained everything to him.
Made him eat it,
all that stuff, and I explained it to him, look at it, and everything else. So that was the first step. But once he got past that, on that first step, it was a good process afterwards, and good steps every time, to the point where you see one, I'd be like, he'd have this look on his face, like, grab that freaking shoe over there and smack it, kill it, and then get a paper towel, pick it up and throw it in the trash. And once he did that the first time, everything was smooth sailing after that.
Now he eats them regularly.
No, he doesn't eat them. I would only eat a cockroach if I had to.
That you know of.
No.
If you were on Fear Factor with
he still has a disdain
with
for
Tyrone
them.
Biggums and Joe Rogan, you'd have to eat them and worms.
Hey, but I've ate worms before. It's not that bad.
Yeah, well, they're not so bad.
No, you just wash them off. They don't taste like anything.
I've eaten ants.
Yeah.
I tell you what, what's really disturbing though is, like, I went to a house one time where a friend of mine, I was helping him out, and we went to his uncle's house, what it was, but his mom and dad were living there temporarily with the uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was going to help him move. And I went with my brother, and we sat down on the couch, and we felt all this weird something. And I looked down at my leg, and there was like 2 of them crawling over my leg.
Cockroaches?
And they were on the couch, dude. And I got off, I jumped up, and I was like, oh. And it was so messed up. And then we went back to one of the back bedrooms, and there was like roaches on the walls. They were all, the whole house.
I can only imagine. They have paper
The
everywhere?
entire house was infested with them, dude. They were in the bathrooms. They crawled over the counters.
Yeah.
How could these people live like that? And of course, his parents were not living there. They wanted to get out. And so when we were outside, his dad spoke very, very broken English, but he told me, he's like la cucarachas, everywhere. Yeah. And he's like, they only been there for like 2 or 3 weeks. But I was like, can you imagine living in that place 2 or 3 weeks? Because they were everywhere. I mean, they were just absolutely everywhere. And my brother was like, he goes, I don't want to touch anything. They're just everywhere.
Mm.
It was like, I just helped them get their bed and their dresser, and I got the heck out. And I was like, yeah, I got to go, dude. I can't do anything else. not afraid of them. It's just gross, and they're just unsanitary and
they are
nasty.
very unsanitary.
That's the only time that's ever happened,
Yeah. So.
I mean, I had a friend of mine tell me one time that they were doing a remodeling job, and one of them fell in his coffee.
Wow.
And he started to drink it, and it was right there swimming out around in his coffee. And then he looked up, he looked up and they were all in the freaking light, like the fixture where they had pulled it off. You know, these people that had lived in the people are nasty, dude. They live in these dirty, nasty, and it's like it's just normal or something. You know, like
it's amazing, but people are strange. People are strange.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how you could live in a place where your whole house is just infested with bugs.
Yeah. Some people do. Some people do.
Yeah.
I guess people can acclimate themselves to just about anything, you know, depending on what you're accustomed to. Who knows?
Yeah.
I remember my dad told me he's always done a lot of business travel. And this had to be back in like the 80s or 90s, before China, you know, had their big boom in technological advancement. And he said there were literally like entire herds of cockroaches that would come up out of the sewer, across the street, go down into the sewer on the other side. I mean, like herds of them, just absolutely everywhere. And they were in all the hotel rooms. You'd flip on the light and it would have moved like 6 feet. And, you know, they're really sensitive to light. So
yes,
you turn it off, they move, you flip it on, they're just frozen, but they're all in different positions all over the room. I mean, talk about creepy.
Oh, God.
That sounds gross.
Well, I've never been to China and I have no plans on ever going.
Yeah, that's
it's just so gross, man. I mean, I don't know, man. I just really have no desire to ever deal with any of that.
No.
Oh, man.
Well, when
the
you think
germs
about it,
they carry.
yeah,
dude.
when you think about it, cities, because there's a lot of people who are very dirty out there. So cities were, in my opinion, are more likely to have a higher concentration of them than out in the wild, because out in the wild, they have their natural predators that munch on them all the time, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Tony's reminding me that I went to Hong Kong. I'm like,
Yeah.
Hong Kong's not China, dude. Well, yeah, it is. It is.
Well,
but
when you went, it really wasn't.
no, it wasn't.
China.
It was actually part of the Brit. It was part of Britain at the time.
Yeah.
Britain had still
It was under British control,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, and they do not want to be a part of China. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really count.
Yeah.
And the place that I went to in Hong Kong, I had friends, and we weren't staying in a Roach motel, no pun intended. But
yeah, I've been to Taiwan twice, and it's, you know, it's a different culture, but it's definitely different than China. I haven't been there, but all the stories I've told, and the Taiwanese feel the same way, where it's like, no, we're not Chinese. Don't associate us with that. Not that I'm saying anything bad about Chinese people, but just, you know, they have some different customs and foods that are very weird to Westerners. Well, that's what baffles me is, unfortunately, in the colleges and universities, for some reason, apparently they're not teaching these kids about the millions and millions and millions of people that died and suffered as a result of these ideologies.
Yeah.
They just hear like, oh, everybody's equal and free stuff. Sounds good to me.
yeah,
And
we're all
it's
going to get
really
iPods. Yeah, right.
The feel good stuff. They only focus on the feel good stuff.
Exactly.
But
Definitely.
and you have one more thing that you were going to tell us.
Yeah,
If we can get into that, and then we can
wrap it up.
But we
Yeah. I know it's late where you guys are, so I wasn't sure if you want me to go into that or if you wanted to do that,
Let's do it. Let's
separately
finish
or
it.
whatever
Sure.
you prefer.
No, sure. Tell us about it. This is the Paranormal Round Table. So if it doesn't fit with the scope of what we were discussing, with your adventures out there at the former Herb Baumeister residence, it's okay. So please let us have it. Let us hear it.
It definitely doesn't have to do with anything to do with Fox Hollow Farm. It's something that happened to me personally, and it's actually why I originally got in touch with Wolf. I've never really talked about it publicly at all, so this is a first, simply because it does sound like totally insane. I completely recognize that. So let's see, where should I start? So basically, I used to live up in the mountains. I'm located here in Colorado. I lived up in Breckenridge and ran a ski lodge up there. And I decided kind of last minute to move back down to the Denver metro area. And my family owns a 50-acre property in Franktown, Colorado. And it's like an agricultural hay property, and it has a living space there and stuff. It's really beautiful. So it's got like flat open areas, but it also has some rock outcroppings and trees. So it's not just one blank flat plain, but it's definitely kind of more in the plains, and that'll come into play a little bit later. So sorry, I think my Dayquil's wearing off. They said, well, we have a space, so why don't you just move in here for a little while? So I was with my ex at the time, time. He and I were together for 7 years, and we're still good friends. So we decided to move in there, and that was in 2014. So living there for a little while, and then in the fall of 2014, I don't remember the exact date, but I know it was the fall, and it was actually a pretty warm night. My ex is a Marine. He was in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he picked up the habit of smoking. And so he had stepped outside to have a cigarette, and we had been in the middle of just some mundane, everyday conversation. And so I decided to follow him out and stand with him while he smoked so that we could keep chatting. I'm standing out there, and basically picture our backs to like the front door is right behind our backs. We're standing right in front of the front door, and we're looking out kind of into the vast expanse of land. And it had just gotten dark. I think it was around like 9 o'clock at night. It wasn't super late, but it was definitely dark. And on this property, when it's dark, I mean, it's dark. There's no lights around. It's a gated community, but there's basically, my family bought it in 2008, right before the market crashed. So there were going to be other houses on the adjacent lots, but because the market crashed, the real estate market right then, those never got built. So the closest house is probably at minimum a 10-minute walk away. And you have to get in the car and like drive just to get to the mailbox, which is close to the nearest house. So there's definitely nobody to go run to and knock on the door. We were pretty much alone out there. So we're standing out there chatting, and although it was super dark, there were very large kind of lantern-style lights on the four corners of the house, and those actually cast quite a bit of light. And also the windows, there's some large windows in the living room and the kitchen. Those were open, so the light from inside was also shining out. So like around the perimeter of the house, it was pretty well illuminated. He's my ex. He's standing on my left, and he's kind of facing to the right, like towards me a little bit. And likewise, I'm on the right, and I'm angled slightly looking to the left, facing towards him as we chat to try to kind of give you an idea of how this worked. And over to the left, the direction that I was looking, there's basically a hill over there. And when I say a hill, we were at the top of the hill, like it plateaus, and that's where the house is. So this hill actually sloped downward, and it goes down into a really secluded little flat area down there. And there's a creek and everything. It's probably the most private spot on the property. So I'm just looking that direction, no spooky feelings or anything, like it was a completely normal night. And suddenly I see this thing come up from over the hill, and it came into to where the light was shining, which was on the driveway. So when I first caught sight of it, when it came out of the darkness, I'd say it was about 25 feet away, approximately. So still close, but it got a lot closer. So it comes up, and trying to describe this thing is kind of difficult without, just sketching it for somebody. But obviously I can't do that for your listeners, so I'll do my best to describe it. It was in no way humanoid looking. It didn't really resemble anything earthly. But it was definitely moving with purpose and intelligence. And this thing was it was kind of teardrop shaped, a little bit fatter towards the bottom, and then it came to a point at the top. It was about 3 feet tall from base to tip vertically. And then at its widest point, it was about 1.5 feet wide. And then it was floating about 1 foot to 1.5 feet off the ground. And it didn't make any noise at all. It was completely silent, but it was moving with definite intelligence and purpose. And it went from our left to the right, and my ex hadn't seen it yet because of the way he wiggled, kind of looking off to the right. I happened to be looking where it had come up over the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, also I should mention the shape of it. It wasn't a perfectly symmetrical teardrop. At the very top, it came to a really extreme point that then kind of curved over. Like I mentioned, it's if you picture an ice cream cone, that's the closest thing I can think of. Like when you stop the flow of ice cream and it comes to a point and then kind of flops to one side.
Yeah.
It looked sort of like that. Yeah. It looked like that as far as flopping to the side, but it was not perfectly smooth. It was really kind of and sort of jutted in different directions. And it had, I know I mentioned this to you guys when we spoke previously, but the best way I can describe it is it had like an organic shape to it. Like it wasn't perfectly smooth or even. It looked kind of, I wish I had a better way to describe it, but that's what it looked like. It was solid matte black. And I do mean solid. There was nothing that was like wispy or misty. Although it was physically moving through, the entire thing was moving and floating. It was gliding along. The shape itself wasn't moving that I saw whatsoever. I didn't see it like undulating or anything along those lines. So it was moving at a pretty speedy pace. It seemed like it was off to do something. It seemed like it had purpose, like it had some directive it was off to go do. And so it went from our left towards our right. And I would say from the period of time I first saw it until it got further to our right was probably a good 6 seconds. And I mean like 1,000 to, like a long count. It doesn't sound that long, but when you're observing something that bizarre, it's plenty of time to get a good look at it. So it went a little ways past us, and then it's like it changed its mind, like it noticed us, and it decided that it wanted to come closer and get a better look. So all of a sudden, it changed course, it reversed course, and kind of slowed a little bit, did a U-turn, and then came back and started to move closer towards us. And then it came to rest. It lowered its elevation just slightly and came to a complete motionless floating stop under the branch of this little tiny kind of baby tree that we have in the front. So at that point, it was only about 15 feet away from us, if that. It was super close. And this tree, it was fall, so it didn't have any leaves, and it's like really wispy, so it didn't block our view at all. But it clearly lowered itself a little bit to go under that branch. And sorry, I get like nervous talking about it. It makes my heart rate speed up just thinking about it. Up until that point, for some bizarre reason, I actually wasn't scared at all. I was just kind of staring in like this dumb wonderment, I guess you could say, just total shock. And I didn't have the slightest feeling of fear, because it's kind of like, it's almost like what we talked about with spiders. People have an instinctual fear of certain things that their mind can classify. So you can see something scurry across the floor and jump before you even realize what it is. You have a fearful reaction. But when you see something that your brain has, you've never heard a description of, you've never seen before, you've never heard anybody talk about anything similar, your mind just can't process what you're looking at. So that entire 6 seconds or so that I watched it float by, it's really bizarre, but I didn't even say anything to my ex, even though he was standing there still chatting away, because I couldn't process what I was looking at. It's like my brain was kind of a computer, or almost like a Rolodex, like going through all the possibilities. And your mind wants to come up with anything earthly to describe.
Yeah, you were kind of, your brain was kind of vapor locked.
Yeah, you could say that.
Wow.
And it strikes me as humorous now, because it didn't actually look like this at all, and it didn't move like this. But what my brain came up with, the only earthly thing was, is that like an upside down floating black trash bag? Like those big construction bags? It didn't actually look like that, but that's all that I could come up with. And it wasn't until it turned back around and came and started to just float motionless under that branch that it suddenly clicked. And then it was like sheer terror. I mean, head to toe, like I could hardly move, because my mind finally recognized the fact that this thing was definitely not a bag. It was definitely not from around here. And it was definitely extremely curious about us and observing us. And I really can't tell you how.
So it's not from around here?
Yeah.
You ain't from around here, boy. Look like a floating trash bag.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, had it been, people always talk about Dog Man or like gray aliens, people describe a lot. If it had been something like that, at least I've heard of that before. So even though I still would have been terrified, at least I could have like classified what I was looking at. With this thing, I couldn't. It was just this huge floating black solid mass. And when I say solid, I mean this thing was just as solid and real and like in this reality as if there was a person standing right there. And it was very clearly intelligent. And it's extremely creepy when you are looking at something that you know for a fact is looking back at you. You can feel it staring at you, but there's like no face or eyes or anything to look back into. It's just this solid black mass. So when it finally clicked and that terror set in, the only thing I could muster to do, because I could hardly move, I was so scared, is I kind of managed to raise my arm and point at it. And I won't cuss on the show, but I basically said, "What the F is that?" And he had been like in the middle of talking. He still hadn't noticed it at that point. And he fell completely silent and said, "What?" Because he could hear like I was really serious in my tone of voice. So he said, "What?" And he turned to look where I was pointing. And then he just fell completely silent and motionless and just stared straight ahead. And I would say he looked at it for probably only about 3 seconds or so. And that was enough time, in retrospect, I can tell he had that same process happen. Like, what the hell am I looking at? And then it finally clicked. Like, I think we're in danger. And so he went into Marine Corps mode and he started screaming at me, "Go, go, go," meaning, get inside the house. And thankfully, thank goodness, the front door was right behind us. So it was closed and we both literally were like scrambling to get inside. And once we did, we slammed the door shut. Now, this part I didn't actually see, but he said that as we were trying to get through the door, he glanced back over his shoulder to try to see where this thing was at, and it had started approaching closer. So he said by the time we got in and slammed that door, it was only like maybe 6 feet away. So I don't know if that means like it wanted to come inside or what would have happened. I have no idea, but that made it a little extra horrifying in my book. And so, unfortunately, since it was so warm out, we had our side door to the master bedroom like wide open. All the windows were open. So he immediately, like I said, went into, Marine Corps mode. He immediately ran to get his gun. And I went and I like furiously slammed shut all the curtains, locked the doors, and both he and I were literally just shaking all over. There was so much adrenaline pumping through us. It was like we couldn't really speak very much, and our hands were shaking. We were horrified. And, he's not one to scare easily. And I should mention this too. Prior to this happening, he did not believe in anything paranormal. He didn't believe in ghosts, aliens, like other dimensions, nothing. He thought it was all complete like bunk and BS. And he kind of, I've always been really interested in that subject, but so he kind of tolerated my fascination with it. But he changed his mind real quick, like in about 0.5 seconds after he saw that. And so he's been a believer ever since. So we kept saying to each other over and over, like, "What was that? What the hell was that?" That's just all we could muster to say. And finally, after we had a few minutes to calm down, much to his credit, he said he was going to go back outside and check to see if it was still out there. And I didn't want him to because I was horrified. And like I said, you have to understand, we're huddled inside and we're on this 50-acre property. It's dark out. And the nearest house is like a minimum of a 10-minute walk away. And so it's just us and we know this thing is floating like 6 feet on the side of the door and we have no idea what it is. So that really added to the feeling of isolation and kind of horror. So I don't know how he was brave enough to do that, but he was. So he grabbed a really big flashlight, took his weapon, and went outside. And I huddled inside like a coward because I was still terrified. He said he did a full perimeter check. He shined it up on the roof. He tried to shine it out kind of into the darkness of the property, and he couldn't see anything. But that's not to say maybe it wasn't still there. I have a feeling it left, but at the same time, I mean, it could have been just outside the range of where the house lights hit, and it was so dark black, it would have blended right in. We would have never known. And also, when he first went to grab his gun, I remember distinctly thinking, like, I don't think that's going to do any good. I got the feeling this thing could probably just float right through a wall or a window if it wanted to. I just didn't get the feeling that was going to do us much good. So, in retrospect, when you're in a moment like that and you're that horrified and you have all this adrenaline and what other chemicals are surging through your body, everything's telling your brain that you're in immediate danger and that this thing is horrible and you have to get away from it. Looking back from a calm state of mind, to be honest, I don't necessarily feel like I got a nefarious feeling from it, like it was malicious. Like I told you guys before, if anything, it was more like it was maybe neutral and just curious. I mean, maybe it was even benevolent. I have no idea. Maybe it wanted to like use our bathroom. Who knows? All I know is that it seemed organic and alive to me. There was nothing about this that either one of us thought felt ghostly. And that's the other really strange thing about this whole encounter is that, and I know this sounds super crazy, we can't explain why. And keep in mind, he was a skeptic, like literally just a minute before this happened.
Mm-hmm.
But as the days progressed and we started talking about things, it was almost like we were finishing each other's sentences. Like, did you feel like, yeah, this? Yeah, did you feel like that? And we both got some extremely distinct, it was almost like an intuition on steroids. So it's not like this thing, whatever it was, communicated directly with us that we're aware of, but it was like being within a certain vicinity of it sort of almost gave off like information via some sort of osmosis. And I know that's super weird, but that's true. I mean, we both felt it, and it was like there were certain things we just knew. We didn't know how we knew it, but we just knew it. And one of those things that we felt like we just completely knew was that it seemed like it was a scout, like it was almost doing reconnaissance, or like it was off to go look at something. It had purpose in the way it was initially moving. So I don't get the feeling at all that it was based on its behavior, that it was there for us in any way. It was like it was off to do something, and then last minute it said, I think I'm going to turn back around and like come check these humans out. And it was just like it was really, really curious, but it definitely wasn't afraid of us. I think the way that it did slow down and kind of approach cautiously, but I think the reason that it did that, it was more a vibe like the way we would approach a little group of bunnies on the side of the road that we wanted to get a better look at. You kind of, move a little more slowly because you don't want to spook them and scare them off. That was more the vibe that I got. It didn't seem like it was scared of us whatsoever. It was just really, really intently focused, like looking at us and curious. Another thing that we both felt was that down that hill where it had come up from, we definitely felt like there was more of whatever that thing was down there. And again, I know this sounds completely insane, but like maybe there was some kind of craft or something. And we got the distinct feeling that this was extraterrestrial in nature. And I know based on its description, that doesn't really make sense. I mean, especially coming from somebody that studies paranormal stuff all the time, if I hadn't been the one to see this and someone came up to me and described what this thing looked like, I would probably think, oh, shadow figure or orb or, something of a ghostly spiritual type nature. But having been directly, 15 feet away from this thing, that was not at all the feeling that I got, like whatsoever. It definitely felt extraterrestrial in nature for sure. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but we both felt that, and considering he didn't even believe in aliens 5 seconds before, I think that's kind of telling that he got the same feeling.
That's just mind-blowing.
I don't understand how somebody can be even skeptical at this point with all this,
just observing that.
Not observing that, but just like, I was at a friend's wedding recently, and the guy asked me, he goes, I heard you had a show. People from my hometown, they're not. Most of them are country folk, and I don't disparage them. I was born country too, and so he was just kind of like, I heard you got a show, and I'm like, yeah, and he goes, man, you believe in all that old stuff? And I'm like, dude, I've lived it. This guy wasn't like a great friend or anything. I hadn't seen him since we were young. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I had never told any of these people from my hometown about the house I lived in over here in Austin. I didn't tell them. But some of them knew about the Dogman thing. Well, this guy's about 10 years younger than me. But I told him, I said, dude, it's real to me. I mean, I know it's real, and I looked him dead in his eye. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No. I think there's a slight delay. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you guys off. I was just going to say one thing I forgot to mention too is that I found out later that property is apparently a major UFO hotspot. And we had a really adorable little 92-year-old neighbor that lived nearby. And we did a hay harvest every year. We'd help my family with that. And he would come and like drive a tractor, even in his 90s. Sweet little Christian guy, like not the type that you would ever think would talk about aliens. We, to this day, have never told him about what we saw, but one day he just started talking about, yeah, I saw a silver cigar-shaped like craft floating over so-and-so's barn. It was just hovering there. And we're like, what? And, this is after we saw what we did. And then other people were reporting all kinds of UFO activity. And it's also right over a flight path between military bases. So we had all kinds of, not constantly, but quite frequently, we had all kinds of military aircraft flying overhead. I don't know if that's related at all, but I just thought I should mention those things too. So I think there's definitely some very weird activity in that area.
Well, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, you're talking about the high plains area, correct?
Not really.
Well, I think Wolf did. Yeah, I'd say the high plains are more like just flat, open, expansive land.
Mm-hmm.
With this, like you have a view of the mountains, like Pikes Peak in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
There's areas of flat land, but there's also like big boulder outcroppings with trees and all kinds of wildlife.
We're talking about going east of Denver. Like once you're east of Denver at a certain point, it becomes the high plains.
Yeah, just because
what she's talking about
mind,
is a little further. What you're talking about though is still closer to the mountains, right? I mean, it's like the plains on one side and then the mountains on the other.
Well, yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of like there's absolutely no mountains to speak of other than the view.
The view, yeah, but they're to your west, right? And the plains are to your east from where you're talking about.
Yeah, this is basically more southeast of Denver.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm just because it brings to mind the area where Dr. Stephen Greer, this gentleman that covers, the contact with extraterrestrial craft or UFOs, whatever you want to call them, however you want to address them. But, he has an area out there, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he referenced that he has an area out there in the high plains area where if you're out there, it's high elevation, but it's like, he calls it high plains. You folks can look it up, but he claims out there on a clear night, boy, you can see the stars like
interesting
end to end. And so I would recommend the people that are interested in what Dr. Stephen Greer does, and if you're really into the as far as paranormal is concerned, you fall under the UFO umbrella or sub umbrella of paranormal, go check him out. He's got his work he's done, and check out what he's talking about. But it's really it doesn't surprise me is what I'm trying to say.
Well, Colorado runs into Kansas.
Yeah.
And Kansas ain't got no mountains. Kansas is flat, but it's high plains.
Yeah.
So that east part, that area, when you're driving through there, especially at night, he's right. You can see the sky. It's very dark too.
Yeah, it'll get dark. If there's no moonlight, it is dark, and the stars just stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, this Franktown property, I mean, for one thing, it's 50 acres, and you mentioned no real neighbors to speak of, so you definitely isolated. Absolutely beautiful property, but at night, I mean, it takes on a whole different feel. It definitely has a spooky vibe, and not just that, but a lot of the wildlife too. I mean, you hear all kinds of stuff howling and moving. One time my ex almost jumped on literally a 6-foot snake. That was horrifying because he's like with snakes like I am with spiders, so that nearly gave him a heart attack. But, you have to be careful out there because there's definitely stuff around. And are you guys familiar with Linda Moulton Howe by chance?
Yep. Sure are. Which
Awesome.
which part of her do you want to talk about?
Well, I was, it's a pretty impressive body of work. Anyone who's not familiar, I highly recommend Googling her. I'm a huge fan. But she did a lot of study on like the cattle and livestock mutilations, and apparently a lot of that was in and around this area where I was living.
And she would bring it to coast a lot too.
Yeah, that's where she got her start, was the cattle mutilation stuff.
Yeah, so I guess there was a lot, at least some of that going on in this area I was living in, which I found out later. And I remember one time I was watching a YouTube video. I saved it. To be honest, I don't remember what it was even about. Obviously, some paranormal topic, but that's not unusual for me. Um, and Suddenly I heard the word Franktown, Colorado. And so my ears kind of perked up because I wasn't really paying attention to it. It was just playing in the background. And my ears perked up, and I can't remember all the details. It was a long time ago, but they were talking about like they found some kind of like circle that had been dug, and the rocks around it were literally like molten steaming, like glowing. They were so hot. And it looked like something had taken some sort of soil sample or something along those lines. I really don't know. I wish I remembered all the details. I'll have to watch it again. But again, my point is just it seems like there's some funky stuff going on
Yeah,
around there.
that property you speak of that belongs to your family, and
Mhm.
it's obviously near hotspot area. It's obviously if not right in the middle of it. So
Yeah.
it's amazing, and that entity you saw was amazing. That's hopefully
Yeah,
somebody out there
there's a
in
lot of
the
history on the property as well.
oh
What was
okay.
that?
No, I said hopefully some of our audience members or someone out there in our audience that's listening to us, hopefully you're helping them. They may have encountered something like that. So
Yeah, well, that was my hope because honestly, I've told very, very few people, just a few, close, trusted relatives and friends,
hmm
and it's kind of hard for people to swallow. But the people that know me well enough to know I would never make up something like that, and so they believe me. But at the same time, it's hard for anybody to be like, okay, you saw this floating black thing. I mean, it's really bizarre. And the last thing I should add to that story, I don't know if you guys got that link I sent, but so it was a long time after it happened. I absolutely scoured the internet for months and months and months looking for, trying to find anything that sounded familiar to what I saw. Because some people, when they have something freaky happen, they kind of want to like push it out of their mind and forget about it. And I'm totally the opposite of that. Like I want to get to the bottom of something. And so, and I'm pretty good at trying to sleuth out things on the internet. But I could not find anything. The only things that came up with search terms were like, shadow figures, orbs, things along those lines. And trust me, none of those fit the bill. And then one day, a long time after this happened, I wasn't even thinking about this encounter, but I happened to be on a paranormal website, and I can't for the life of me remember what the website was, but it had this long list of links, and the links were kind of nondescript. They had a very generic title to each link. It wasn't like it gave away what it was about, basically. So I'm scrolling through this super long list, and something told me to click on one specifically. And I mean, this was like a list of 100 or more. And it wasn't an audible voice, but it was something very distinctly told me, click on that one. And prior to this, I'd kind of, like I said, I believe in, God and kind of a unity to the universe. So I'd
hmm
sort of put out there, like, I give up. I can't find anything about this. I'd really love to have an answer. Can the universe please send me an answer to what I saw? And it really wasn't that long after I did that I had that intuition to click on that link. So I did. And my jaw was absolutely on the floor. I won't go into all the details because it's a really long, detailed story. But suffice it to say, it was it was a story from 1989. It's been put on multiple UFO websites. And it was about two Russian truckers that were driving late one night, and they encountered a UFO that had landed kind of off to the right side of the road. And they pulled over. And what blew me away is that there's a whole lot more to it, but what blew me away is that the trucker who got out and approached closer saw these beings coming off the craft, and he said that they struck him that they looked like black bags. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, that's really specific. And then on top of that, at one point in the story, he kind of thinks in his mind, like, I'd really like to see the inside of the ship. And they gave him an invite, I guess telepathically or something, to come on the
hmm
ship. Once he was on there, he asked, what kind of craft is this? And they said, it's a scout ship. And those two things, I was like, what the heck are the odds that these two random truckers in the 80s would be talking about these beings that look like floating black bags, and that they talked about it being a scout ship. And there was even more to it, but to me, I really kind of felt like maybe that was sort of an answer from God or the universe, or however you want to put it. And it also confirmed what both my ex and I had felt so strongly, that we thought it was extraterrestrial in nature.
Wow, that's just amazing. And I'm at a loss for words, because you obviously you had a very unique experience, and then you find a story, for lack of better words, find a story that coincides with what you experienced. That's just amazing. I mean, to be able to find that.
Yeah, and the odds of it. I mean, first of all, I wasn't even thinking about the experience when I stumbled on that link. I got the intuition to click out of this whole lengthy list on that one specific nondescript link, and that it would have such specific references. I can't believe that that's just coincidence. I don't know. I was really happy to get an answer. And in retrospect, because I am interested in unusual topics, I feel really honored in a weird way that I got to see something so absolutely bizarre, like right there with my own two eyes. I'm super thrilled that I had a witness there with me, because I probably might have questioned my sanity or second guessed myself otherwise. And it kind of helps that he was a skeptic too, because that really cemented that we definitely saw what we saw. But there's a part of me that sort of wishes I could have not had such a fearful reaction, and could have actually stood there and tried to, interact, or, as silly as that sounds, communicate, or at least, observed it longer. But when fight or flight takes over, your brain really is.
Yeah, you go on autopilot once that kicks in. So, but it's understandably so. Wow. And I just hope someone that's listening out there will come forward and let us know, and see if they, and tell us their story if they've encountered something similar to what you've encountered, because that's just really amazing.
That's my biggest hope. Like, one of the main reasons that because what do you get out of it if you tell something like this? Maybe it's entertaining for people, but mostly you probably get ridicule or people thinking that you're nuts. But I was willing to talk about it because I'm just hoping that maybe somebody else on this planet at some point has seen something similar, and we can combine information or try to get some answers.
Yeah, definitely, because I believe when we spoke before off the air, I mentioned to you about Brenton Salwin, who has his own channel, and he had that encounter with a Darrow when he was, I believe, 5 years old, and he went years before he came across any information describing these Darrow creatures.
Do you know what a Darrow is?
Yeah.
I do. Pardon me, I do, and I think I actually know the guy that you're talking about. Does he kind of have a southern?
Yes, he's
accent?
from Lexington, Kentucky.
Yep, I know exactly.
Yeah,
yep, I know who it is.
But like you, he had this very unique encounter with these beings that he had not found anything corroborating these creatures until I'm trying to remember exactly how he came across another story. And of course, he came across a story. It was an older book, I think from the 50s, where they were telling the stories about this Darrow civilization that's deep underground. And that was his first corroboration of what he encountered and what he interacted with. It was a negative interaction, of course, for him, but that was the first time. And then I remember listening to one of his episodes where he had another gentleman that told his story about encountering a Darrow. So, you sharing this story right now with us, hopefully someone out there may have a story, and it will encourage them to come forward and let us know about it.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe it'll be the same serendipitous thing as me stumbling on that link where the right person's listening at the right time, It's weird because my experience is so kind of different.
It's unique.
Than a lot of the ones I've heard.
It's definitely unique. This is the first I've ever heard of any type of interaction like this. And I listen to a lot of podcasts with people telling their experiences and so on and so forth. And the only guy that I could think of right off the top of my head that could potentially have something, a story of an encounter of any kind with potentially an entity like you encountered would be Mr. Albert Rosales, he's the author of the Humanoid Journals, and he's been collecting stories of UFO related stuff for years, at least 30 to 35 years. And so he's the only guy I could possibly think that would have something in his archives related or similar to what you experienced. That's the only thing I can think
He's
of.
got an extensive body of work.
Yeah, it's huge.
He's been, and he classifies it all based on like the years. Like he has it all through the years.
Yeah, he categorizes it in a chronological fashion.
There's another book, I think it's called Inhumanoids or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah,
no, not his. There's another book. It's called Inhumanoids.
Yes, that's another book. Yes,
it's not his though. But
no, it's not.
It's a good book, and it's got like a lot of really good stories in it. And I don't even remember how it was like self-published by somebody, I think, or something like a group. But I remember reading it a long time ago. There's a lot of weird stuff out there, man. A lot of creepy stuff. You can't, So Anna, I'm sorry, Anna. I was going to tell you, I need to stop doing my cousin's name is Anna. I had to be able to remember that.
I know.
But what I was going to tell you is, we are going on 3.5 hours here. So what I was going to tell you, we'd like you to come back eventually and do some, when you go, and you're going to be doing an investigation of the Gacy property, right?
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. So when you're done with that, get back with us and come back and bring on some more of your investigation finds, your EVPs. Bring us your other stories that other properties you've done, and we can talk about all the other things you've done. Today we kind of focused on the Baumeister property, or no longer Baumeister property, but the Fox Hollow Farms. Yeah, and we talked about your encounter with what sounds like an extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial of some sort. And so,
well, I wrote down those that title and also that name. So I'm gonna look those up. And I had thought about actually emailing Linda Moulton Howe, like I mentioned, because I figured if anyone has this huge database of experiencers, maybe she's heard of something similar.
Yeah, definitely,
but to be honest,
she's
there
one.
was just something about your show, and I just wanted to talk to you guys first.
Well, thank you for giving us that honor. We definitely appreciate it. And of course, Miss Linda Moulton Howe is definitely a great source to refer to. And of course, Mr. Albert Rosales, you can reach out to him and pick at his brain and see what he has.
Give him your encounter.
Yeah. And then
he can put it in his archives.
So it's really,
for sure,
really wonderful, and really.
Hopefully, it helps somebody else out there. If anyone else has encountered this, hopefully, at least it helps them. And I appreciate anybody that's had any kind of weird paranormal experience that's brave enough to come forward, because the more people that do that, the more information is put into kind of the collective pool of consciousness. The more people will wake up to the fact that this stuff really does happen. People aren't having like a mass hallucination. There's, it's the way I look at it is it's not even really paranormal. It's the normal. We're just not used to it yet.
Science
it's just
hasn't caught up to it yet.
Yeah. And a lot of it too.
Our senses just can't pick up on it, but that doesn't mean it hasn't existed the whole time.
Yeah. And a lot of people, we've said it before on this show that there's a lot of people that may not want to entertain this because it causes cognitive dissonance, and so that's not something that the average person wants to experience because it shatters their worldview and their reality. So,
well, I was saying earlier about when I was at that wedding, and that guy was like, "You believe in that?" And I'm like, "It's real. It's a reality." I looked him dead in the eye, and I was like, "Dude, I saw a wolf on 2 legs." When I was 15. And I told him, I said, "You won't believe how many people at this wedding I've actually spoken to who've seen this similar thing." And he started kind of looking around, like trying to figure out who it was. And I'm like, there was probably about 3 or 4 at that wedding, that I had spoken to, that had confided in me about it. And there are at least 1 or 2 guys that I've known over the years that were out hunting, hog hunting, and out near my hometown, and they saw something. And I still to this day haven't told their stories because they asked me not to. I guess the fear that somebody might figure out who they
fear
were,
of ridicule.
Yeah, and it's kind of annoying to me because you don't trust me to not say your name.
Yeah. So.
On my deathbed, I will give everyone's name. No, just kidding, because they'll come after my family or some crap. So I won't do that.
Definitely. But it's been a pleasure having you on the show, Anna. And, we
I
look
can't
forward to the next time you come back.
Absolutely. You have a good voice. You speak well. So you're somebody that can
thank
definitely
you.
come on. And I'm glad you chose us to come on and give your information to.
Definitely.
Now you got to sign the paperwork I sent you. There's a clause in there. We forbid you to ever talk to any other talk shows. You are now bound to us for all eternity.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I think I'd be all right with that.
We're going to sign a blood pact.
I really am. I'm honored that you guys had me on. I really appreciate it so much. It's very cathartic, and that's why I would encourage anybody else listening to this, if you have a story, to contact Wolf and Sal and let them know what happened to you, because you're definitely not alone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you guys are the first. This is the first public time I've ever talked about it, and it definitely actually helps because I've had it bottled up for a long time. But I can't thank you guys enough.
The audio was a little bit rough in patches because of the connection. But I think that, you have a good speaking voice and you could do this in the future on other shows and whatever and come on and talk about your investigations. I think you could be the voice of your group.
Oh, well, I'm extremely flattered, to be honest. I mentioned this to you guys off air, but I'm battling a cold and I haven't slept much. And so I felt kind of discombobulated and all over the place.
It's pretty good, though.
Really,
I mean, I think you did very well, all things considered. And I think that you, like I said, you have a very good voice and you're very articulate. You sound very intelligent,
Definitely.
Well, I appreciate that. It's all a ruse. I'm really stupid.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you are intelligent. You just sound intelligent. You're like those serial killers that fool everybody.
The facade.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, it was a lot of fun, but I do apologize if I wasn't quite myself. I feel like I'll be more on point when I'm...
no worries.
She really is very dumb, folks. And when she gets off the phone, she'll forget everything. She's like Patrick Starr. Like, did you wash your car today, Anna? No, but I hit it with a rock. Oh, okay. Once again, that's Anna. Just kidding.
That's not a, in your car?
You're very intelligent. No, seriously.
Yeah, definitely.
So, anyways, we had a good time talking to you. I can't believe we went 3.5 hours on there all together.
Sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. That's all this is all about. I mean, we're trying to get
the story
information and stories and stuff. I did sleep a little bit, during the interview, but I'm just kidding. No, I was just trying to be quiet and let you speak, unlike Sal, who's
I rudely interrupted.
Chatty Cathy over here.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, I try to, I got some complaints that we were talking too much during guest interviews. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna be quiet. And when the show starts to suck, you'll know why.
No.
Then you'll be begging to have me back.
When you guys have your banter, it's funny, and you're so knowledgeable about these things that I love listening to you when you go off on those tangents. I don't know how other people feel.
They get mad. They scream and pull their hair out. They're like so angry because we make jokes like the Salresian thing. There's a guy that continues to complain about that, and I'm just like, you know what, dude? Quit. Why are you listening? If you hate the joke so bad and you want to keep complaining, it's getting old, dude. And I'm like, you keep listening and you keep complaining. You know what? And it made me stretch it out for a few episodes because we were going to stop, but he just kept complaining. So I told my wife, I was like, you see this? I'm going to keep complaining just to aggravate that guy.
But there is a form of magic that will help this individual to avoid that bad joke. It's called fast forward on that.
It
thing.
is. And it's called, you know what? You can just not listen. That's another thing.
Either or, but hey, we're trying to just make it a very conversational interview with folks. Just like if
we don't interview, we discuss.
There you go.
We don't have interviews because like Vic, when we did the interview with him, if you want to call it that, he's
That's
like
the right word.
He's like, I want to do a discussion the way you guys do it, the way you talk.
Yes.
And talk. He goes, I would enjoy that. He goes, if you just rigidly put down a bunch of questions and I got to sit there like a robot, he goes, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, not that he couldn't do the interviews, but that he couldn't, and he wouldn't enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so and that's why his interviews don't last that long. We went about 3 hours with Vic.
Yeah,
it was pretty long because you can sit there and talk and discuss things. And I was tired as heck that night, but I just was so important to me to have a discussion with the guy that helped me get my start, so it was very important to me to get that done.
And I think it was also very revealing because many people thought Vic was this robotic type person, but it was a side of Vic that people didn't think existed.
They rarely get to ever see or hear.
It was the real Vic on there.
That's the real Vic. That's the Vic I know when I talk to him in private. And And the joking, we joke and laugh like crazy all the time. I mean, we really do. I mean, he's a funny guy. People don't realize that Vic is actually a very funny guy. And
yeah, well, shout out to Vic because his show's amazing, and that's what led me to you.
Oh
guys,
yeah,
so.
you wouldn't have found me without him. I mean, there is definitely a bond I have with that guy, and me and him have talked off air. We'll finish recording and we'll just be talking. Next thing you know, it's been an hour, and we're like, "Whoa, dude!" You know. Yeah. And we'll do that before the show, after the show, whatever, and we'll talk and talk. And Vic will talk to me and give me his ideas about stuff. And he was instrumental. Him and Chris, you know,
Chris Edge,
they were really instrumental in helping me get my show up and going. Got support from people like Luke Penton and D-Doss. I like those guys.
Yeah, we're not here to disparage people on what they're doing. It's not a format or a platform for us to be up here. Oh, well, such and such on such and such channel is talking this garbage, and person X on other channel is talking.
People think that they're supposed to just listen to one of us.
Yeah,
like this one guy, he put on a comment. He said, "I tried. I'm going back to Vic." Like, nobody told you to leave Vic, dude. What are you talking about? There's room enough in your life for more than one podcast.
Yes,
are you that busy? He's like, I can't do this, man. I'm trying to drink over here and raise a baby. I can't listen to you and Vic. I got to just get rid of something. It's like, dude, or whatever, you know.
Seriously, jeez. There's another magic thing, like on Facebook. People get so bent out of shape with certain posts. It's called keep scrolling. Yeah. And you don't have to comment on everything that pisses you off.
Technology is amazing.
It's really easy, I swear.
Yes, I'm like you. It's
you're mellow. You know, I'm not.
I'm like you as far as the stuff like that. You know, hey, dude, person, girl, whatever.
Ma'am, sir, baby, child, whatever. Yeah,
don't take yourself so serious. You know, relax.
Right.
It's been wonderful having you on, folks. Please like, subscribe, comment, and the email, of course, is
daswolfman88@gmail.com
or wolfandsal@gmail.com. Send us your stories. We want to hear.
Please, and like and subscribe.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, and thank you again, Anna, for being on the show with us.
And so anyways, we had a good time, everybody. Goodbye. See you later.
Y'all have a good one.